In this Rick Talk, we're going to be talking about color modes in Photoshop. This relates to a couple of the videos that I did that are actually in the Photoshop series, and so they work hand in hand. I believe number 5 and 6, so you might find those helpful as well. But here, what we want to talk about is color modes. And I think it's really important. My philosophy is that knowing Photoshop is more than being able to just sit and putz with a bunch of filters and wacky effects. It's more about understanding what's really going on with Photoshop behind the scenes, underneath the hood, if you will, and quite a bit of that relates to technical stuff like this, color modes, and there's a direct correlation to channels as well, where a lot of advanced work is done by many professional folks. So you need to know what's really going on, and so that's what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to start with the simplest form of a graphic, a pixel-based graphic. And remember, when at least for myself, when we're talking about Photoshop, we're also talking about anything that you capture with your digital camera or that you scan on a scanner. And we need to understand about pixel depth. And because remember, with Photoshop type images, there isn't really a specific way to press a button and create a picture of a dog or a house or a car or a tree. You have to build it one pixel at a time. And in its simplest form, remember that pixels, each pixel is either black or white. And inside the computer, that registers as a 0 or a 1. A 0 or a 1. Okay, and each pixel, whether it's a 0 or a 1, or it's black or white on the screen, is one bit of information. Okay, and the most basic kind, and I've covered this idea in other videos, think of if I gave you a stack of old-fashioned, what I call bath tiles, black and white bath tiles, those little 1-inch square things, and I said make a picture, a very simple sort of picture out of them. You'd more or less put them together in like a checkerboard or a grid fashion, and you could create a rudimentary image of a tree or a house, etc. And so that is the most basic kind. Well, clearly what we're going to talk about is, so how would we get from there all the way up to color images and etc. And and the most basic kind, as I really just mentioned, is what's considered a 1-bit image, And in the main menu in Photoshop, we drop down to color modes, and we have a handful of different modes, and the first one is a what's called bitmapped. Well, in my estimation, that's probably not well phrased, because everything in Photoshop is bitmapped. But the most simple kind of graphic is a 1-bit image. The pixels are all either pure black or white. There's no illusion of tone. tone, meaning think of a black and white photograph. You have dark areas and dark tones and light tones, etc. That give us the illusion of depth and space and three-dimensionality that we all think of as part of reality. The 1-bit or bit-mapped image type image is no illusion of tone. It's really very similar to pointillism or stippling. You can see I've got just a very simple example here, and if we were to zoom in, we would in fact see that there's no illusion of light tones and dark tones. It's all either pure black or white. Okay? And it's like I said in the previous slide, it's like making pictures from old black and white bath tiles. An important point here is that the white areas in Photoshop type images, the white areas, what we think of as might be in the background, if we had a picture of a football or a baseball that doesn't completely fill the frame like a photograph might, those white areas or blank areas also take up memory. And remember that all of the canvas, all of the area needs to be recorded. Okay? One of the nice things about a 1-bit image or bit-mapped mode image like this, it's great for if you're scanning a signature that you want to put in a brochure or something of that nature, because when you take images out of Photoshop, for the most part, the white areas, even if you make them transparent in Photoshop, become white opaque areas outside of Photoshop if you put that graphic in Illustrator or place it in a document in InDesign. And one thing that is nice about 1-bit images is that the white areas are truly transparent even outside of Photoshop. So a signature dropped in on a letter that is really nice because it'll look and have the feel that somebody actually signed their name. You know, if you had some pen and ink drawings, the bitmap mode might be a good way to capture those images. And so hence we have the 1-bit type image. Okay? And when we want to go to the modes, you go up to Image in the main menu of Photoshop, and the first thing when you drop down is the modes. And then, of course, we are bound to say, well, of course, we've all seen beautiful black and white photographs in a Photoshop, and there was plenty of tones of gray. And so how do we get there? Well, again, in color modes in Photoshop, it's called grayscale mode. Grayscale mode. And by the way, I didn't mention it here, but if you go to convert an image to the previous 1-bit type image, it's grayed out. And so you have to convert an image to this grayscale mode first, and then you can strip out all the tone and go back and then convert it to the bitmap or 1-bit mode. Well, this is called an 8-bit image, and it's because it's 2 to the 8th power. And what that means is if we multiplied 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, 2 8 times. That's 2 to the 8th power, and you're going to end up with 256. Now, the deal here is that somebody along the way figured out that we could take each pixel, and instead of the entire pixel being pure black or pure white, we could break that pixel down into a much smaller grid of pieces, parts, if you will, and that is a 16 by 16 area, okay, a 16 by 16 grid. And if we multiply 16 times 16, we'll also get 256 that way. But why it's an 8-bit, because referred to as an 8-bit, because it's 2 to the 8th power, and the 2 is black and white, and we can get this illusion, and it's all an illusion and smoke and mirrors of grayscale or tone, because if we break it down into this little 16 by 16 grid, the more of these little pieces, parts that are black, because our eye can't really discern those little mini pieces, parts, the more of them that are black, the illusion to our eye is going to be that it's a darker gray pixel. And the more pieces, parts that are left white, then to our eye, again, we can't see those individual pieces, parts, but it all blends together, and it's going to have the illusion of a lighter tone gray. And so that is in fact how we get the illusion of tonality in images. And also, all of those little pieces, parts, are now 1 bit of information instead of the entire pixel being 1 bit of information. All of the individual little pieces, parts. So now each pixel is 256 bits, actually 254, and then you've got black and you've got white, which creates the 256, okay? And so it's really interesting and important to understand what in the heck is really going on in Photoshop. And at this point, we're talking about a grayscale or a black and white image, and it creates the illusion of having tonality, or traditionally, even long before the old computers, what a continuous tone image is. A continuous tone image. Again, the way we see the world through our eyes, with depth and tonality and the illusion of dimension, etc. So that's the grayscale mode. And the other thing is that it's important when we relate to what I first mentioned when we started this business of channels in Photoshop. This is a single channel image. A grayscale image is a single channel image. So is bitmap mode, also a single channel. Again, working with channels is very important in understanding them, because as we move up the scale here, if you will, and we start talking about color images, the channels are the backbone components of the color information. Okay, so hopefully this makes a little bit of sense to you. An 8-bit image, 2 to the 8th power, is a grayscale image. Then, of course, we start talking about color images. And basically, color images fall into 2 categories, and this is very important as well. We have 24-bit images. 24-bit images. And notice I purposely am trying to put this together in a way that there's at least you can see the logic of how we move from simple images to more complex images. A 24-bit image is 2 to the 24th power. So again, 2 times 2 times 2 2 2 2 2 24 times, and you are going to end up with approximately 16.7 million. And that's the number of colors that the standard 24-bit image will display on a computer screen and in today's technology. Okay, and again, the straight numbers way of getting there is 256 times 256 times 256. That will also get you to that same basic number. And notice, 256 was the number of tones of a grayscale, a single grayscale black and white image. Well, in fact, that's what the channels are that make up a 24-bit or RGB mode image, because you will see that there are three grayscale channels that represent the color information. Now, RGB is what I always call electronic color. It's very different than color as it exists in our environment, in our real world. Electronic color is color as it exists in our computer screens, how our cameras capture color images, and most scanners capture. Even if they convert it with software automatically, they are basically RGB, red, green, and blue devices. Now, couple of things here. So we end up with a 24-bit image. It has 3 channels. Each is one of the colors. Now, red, green, and blue doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the world that we understand with color, the way we learned it, the primary colors in the first grade. That we'll get to in a minute, because that is real world color. So here in the electronic world, red, green, and blue. Of course, if I gave you some red, green, and blue paint and I said, mix it all together, what are you going to get? You would probably figure out that, you're going to get some kind of a dirty brown or something of that nature. Well, to show you how a different RGB color is, RGB altogether creates white. It creates white. So it totally throws everything that we know and perceive about color on its head. Electronic color, it is really rich and saturated. It's because the light source directly lights up the pixels or the picture elements that create the images on our screens and even TVs to a large extent. In the old days of traditional monitors, you had literally 3 light guns, and if you will, inside the the TV, and the light source itself lights up the color elements. So it's very direct, it's very intense. You can create almost electronic or fluorescent colors in RGB on your computer screen. If I gave you regular paint, can you create, very almost fluorescent, electric type intense colors? No. You need special paint, or you need to have special additive to the paint, etc. So I'm just trying to give you some of the things that make RGB color very different. And it's the color mode that we use for multimedia, for web pages, and that sort of thing. So the color is created directly from the light source. It's also, in the lingo of color language, it's called additive color. And I've always just said to myself, oh yeah, it's because when you add them all together, you get white. So it's additive color. Okay, and it's important, especially if you're in graphic design and you're in going to be preparing something for print. That you convert your images to the next color mode, which is CMYK, or you at least change your preview in Photoshop to proof colors, which lets you see things more like they're going to, in fact, look in CMYK, because you don't want to get hoodwinked and forget that, oh, you got all this luscious, rich color. And when we convert to CMYK, what happens, and if you watch the Photoshop video on modes, color modes, I actually show you a very clear example. Color, the same color, when converted to CMYK, gets darker and much more dull. It dramatically can shift if the color, in fact, was a very, what I call, electric, intense, bright color. Some colors or some images, when converted to CMYK, won't appear to change at all, but quite often, in fact, they do. So this is the RGB mode, which again is right there under Image in the Photoshop main menu. And so when we convert images to CMYK, we have what is called a 32-bit image. And 32-bit images, or CMYK mode, is really much more kin to what we all learned in the first grade about blue, red, and yellow. And in fact, the colors are a variation of that. Now, what we have, of course, is we have, instead of bright flag blue, we have this light kind of sky blue that's called cyan. And instead of flag red, we have this pinkish color called magenta and yellow, and then so that we can create dark shadows and dark tones, really dark tones in photographs, etc. We add black. Okay, and so it's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or CMYK. And again, it may not look any different on the screen, but then again, it might. And this is called a 32-bit image. Once again, it's very important that we understand, again, 2 to the 32nd power. But this is not actually a typo, typographic error on my part, because obviously 2 to the 32nd power, remember, the computer is only a 24-bit image tool. And so what it does is it approximates what things look like in CMYK, and it breaks the image down into 4 into 4 8-bit channels, 4 grayscale channels, each one carrying the color information for that image. For instance, look at this little photograph here, again, of the dune. Well, when we look at the individual channels, think of it as an image on a black and white TV. We're going to have 4 parts. I purposely don't call them layers because we all have and are used to the layers palette within our software programs, including Photoshop. So the channels are different, but the channels are the components that carry the color information. So when we look at the cyan channel of this image, we would expect it to be very dark, almost black. Why? Because there's obviously a lot of blue or cyan in this image. We would also expect the magenta channel to be a very dark grayscale image, because there's obviously a lot of magenta in the sky, as well as a lot of information in the dune area below. And then with the yellow channel, we would expect the areas of that in the dune to be pretty dark, because clearly we can see there's a lot of yellow and even a lot of magenta in the dune image. Okay, so again, think of it as the color component in black and white form, because that's what's really going on. And so the computer can only give us approximately 16.7 million colors. So it's just approximating what it would look like in CMYK, and it does break the channels down, but we don't actually get more colors on the screen. Okay, and so we call the CMYK mode the real world color. It literally has less colors than RGB, because in CMYK all color, and when we think of how our eyes work in the real world, we've got to have a color source, a light source, a light source that reflects off of the images around us, whether it's the sunlight or a fluorescent lamp or some other kind of light source. As we all know, in a dark closet, our eyes don't see anything. In CMYK, or what I call real world color, there has to be an external light source. The light bounces off of, it reflects off of the images around us. All of the light and color is absorbed into the image, and based on what it's made out of, etc., some of what we perceive of as the color is reflected off of the image instead of being completely absorbed. It is reflected off of the object and with some of the light, and that is reflected back into our eyes, and that's how we perceive color, basically. And I realize this is a bit of a simplistic view. The physics are much more complex than that. But the important point that you need to understand is an RGB image is a 3-channel, a CMYK is a 4-channel. The RGB color is much more intense than you can expect to get, and it's because it's created from a direct light source. And in CMYK, or real world color, there has to be another light source, and the light is reflected and the color is reflected off of the objects around us. And it's called subtractive color. Subtractive color. And if you go again to, I believe it's number 5 modes in the Photoshop series on the Rick Rice 1 channel, you can see examples of how this works. I actually pull up an image in Photoshop and go through that part of it and look at the channels as well. So very, very important information in understanding color and understanding the real world and how that differs from the electronic world of all these devices, and the fact that color is very different from one place to another, one computer to another, one printer to another, is part of what has made this somewhat difficult. It's getting better with color management tools, but the reality is it can still drive you nuts, and it does our clients as well who don't understand some of this stuff. So thanks again for checking in another one of the Rick Talks and the Rick Rice 1 channel, and I've got some more to do, so come on back